No, there's something that can be done about it. Anything that can be put apart or built up by people, anything that can be put together by people can be
Mm,
taken apart by people.
mm,
But you have to know how it's put together
right.
in order to do it in a manner that makes sense.
Mm,
And if you're not aware that it is together and how it works, and this is why the statement in the front of the textbook for victims of racism is if you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you.
mm,
It's real quick. I'm glad he's reiterating that. And that's something that we reiterate a lot on this channel because we can see that in the behaviors that we exhibit as Black people, especially our reactionary behavior to a lot of the things that happen to Black people within the regular society or even in popular culture. The way we react and the way we yield no real results from our reactions is a great example of how we don't understand racism. The majority of Black people don't understand racism, and everything else that they are learning is really confusing them. And you can see it in their actions because it's continued actions that continue to get no results. So, y'all want to add anything to it?
Well, I think it's self-explanatory and explains why we always seem to have debates with the show me the plan people. What's the
Yeah.
plan? What's the plan? If you don't really understand systemically what racism, white supremacy is, then you consistently fall for traps that keep us in wrapped up in circular politics that never, or I guess we'll call it hamster wheel politics that never
Mhm.
move us forward. And, we might work hard, but at the end of the day, we're not moving. And when you look at what racism, white supremacy truly is and how it functions, it's not an individual thing. It's a systemic, uh,
Group thing.
yeah, it's a systemic group plane, but it's also a play on power and domination, manifested destiny, eminent
Mhm.
domain. All these things factor into racism, white supremacy, layered and layered and layers of laws and politics and policy that are in place to maintain the dominance of this society of white supremacy. A lot of people get into the name play and talk about, well, I don't think they're supreme to us. And when you
Right.
talk about white supremacy, that must mean you feel inferior to them.
Right.
There's nothing to do with that. This is a system of dominance. And if you can't see that they're dominating us in every aspect of it, I don't know what the hell you're looking at.
Right. Forget how you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Pat, you ain't got nothing to add. There you go. We're gonna continue then. Let's go. Let's roll.
And that's going to be the result. So the result is what you're looking at is confusion. Now you're looking at refined versions of confusion all over the place. And
Right. Exactly what we were just saying.
It's
Exactly
them
what we were just saying. Refined versions of confusion.
them calcified frontal lobes. Absolutely. I like that. Yeah.
Right, right, right. Let's roll.
people who are confused, uh, confusion is sort of like the preface to a lot of other things that shouldn't be happening, like anger, frustration. When you're confused, you get angry, you get frustrated, and
Reaction.
then you just lash out.
Mm,
Mhm.
And you lash out at whoever happens to be standing near you that you perceive as being weaker than you. That's sort of a normal reaction among all confused organisms. Or on a one-on-one basis, under some instances that has happened. I mean, people know how to deal with it, and it becomes codified to a degree. But there's nothing that is orchestrated on a long-term basis and on a consistent basis. That's why what is needed is a counter-racist code. The racists go by a code. It's very precise in all 9 areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
mm,
It just about covers everything that people are engaged in From one,
So that's the part. That's the part I want to play. I want him to get that far and talk about that. So that could take us into our codes. But like he's talking about confusion that doesn't last long and doesn't lead to anything. And this confusion is come about because people are frustrated because there's no real progress being made and that continue to be stepped on. But until we can get over the animosity that we have between ourselves, until black people stop hating other black people and we get out of this place that we are, where we just refuse to work with other people and people so individualized, we're going to continue to be stepped on. Why would any other group of people respect us when we continue to act the way we act?
Yeah,
I think that's the confusion. But go ahead, PC.
No. Go ahead. I was just really clearing my throat. Go ahead, bro.
No, I was just gonna say. I think that's the confusion. In my opinion, I do think the frustration is a lot to do with the lack of progress.
Right.
I also think the frustration is a lot to do with the confusion and the failure to understand what we're dealing with. Like when I'm working with people that are new to this information, one of the first things I try to do is get them to look at white supremacy and racism in America from the standpoint of a white person.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because when you do that, it all starts to make sense. And then you begin to see why we haven't made no progress. And all of the confusion and the frustration just kind of falls away. You know, when you drop this premise of, well, I'm a human just like they're a human. Why would they treat me like this? And then it's like, okay,
that's your fault. That's your problem.
Yeah, if you're in a position of power and dominance and the world revolves around you, your world revolves around you, and the people around you's world also revolves around you, would you willingly give that up?
But
there are very few Mother Teresa's out here.
But I think that's in my opinion, a part of that is the level of comfort that we have in our society and the lack of in your face, I don't care about none of you black people, we're gonna burn down everything, racism. Like we have our instances, and we're not saying it's over. It's not over by a long shot, and things still happen, but it's not happening like it was happening in Jim Crow. It's not, nobody's being lynched. It's not in your face anymore. And so you got generations who they don't even really understand the concept of racism in the real sense of what it is. So they just understand it in the sense of this woke movement sense. And they really have no idea what real racism is and what real conquerors really think, move, walk, and act like you said. I'm not giving up nothing because you want me to. And I've always asked the question, because I hate when people are talking about we need to sit down and have a conversation. What we're gonna talk about that's gonna lead to white people giving up money, power, land, and resources.
Man, you can't even talk to your white neighbors and ask them to give up any of their land, power, and resources.
I'm just saying.
In a time of crisis. I think one of the most interesting things about this conversation, and Pat, I think that was a great way to introduce the concept of racism, white supremacy, because we're ruggedly individual, and we have bought into that whole concept of rugged individualism that was taught to us. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, things of that nature, because most of us are inherently ignorant to the history of this country and its effects, its effects and effectiveness that it displays in terms of maintaining us as a bottom feeder class in this particular society. So many of us try to do this thing on our own. Yep. And when you do this thing on your own and you have to face a system that can come at you at waves with practically unlimited resources at their disposal, at least the type of resources they have at their disposal is insurmountable to us at this particular moment. When you're looking at all those different things, it's something that can defeat you. And I've seen people really just throw in the towel and like, listen, I'm gonna just do for me. Yes. You know what I'm saying? I'm just this, and
we get it.
Yeah. And the crumbs at the table, too many people aren't willing to give up the crumbs, to sacrifice the crumbs. I'm talking about their nice cars. I'm talking about the expensive job. I'm talking about the houses that put them in perpetual debt for 30 years. People aren't willing to give up those things in order to put their efforts into building something of their own. So you might not have a $500,000 house, but you might have a house that costs $100,000, but you control the equity within that community if you work together. Too often we try to play their game by their rules, and they have often shown us that when we get good at their game, they change the rules. So, and that's just when you have a system of power. You get to dictate what those things are.
The golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rule. You want to make the rules, get the gold.
Well, we and I'll say this, because there's also, I agree with what both of you said, particularly the failure to understand and even know history. That's a conversation I was having with Joe earlier today when I was talking about a young man. I was talking to a young man who said something with regards to history being the cause of the problems. And then there's just a fundamental lack of so you guys know me, right? I rarely get frustrated. I rarely get frustrated with white people doing like racism. Rarely, if ever, frustrates me because I understand it. It makes sense.
I'm in that place now.
Black people, the way they move, rarely, if ever, frustrates me. Now, I do get immensely frustrated with the Black conscious community. That's
yes.
I will wear that. But in terms of the average Black person, I don't really get frustrated or upset by the way they move. And that's because I understand the system, and I'm gonna keep harping on this because he harped on it, and that's because it's one of the purposes of the codes of conduct, because everybody's not going to understand the system, but everybody should understand the cultural framework that protects them from it.
Right.
So, but one of the things we got to deal with here is, because here's the thing, right? They're not outright lynching us in the streets like they were in the early 1900s, 1800s, and whatnot, where bodies were stacked up and decayed flesh was everywhere and all of this other stuff. But there are still lynchings happening.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's interesting to me is a lot of the lynchings that happened back in the day, we understand now they were allowed to pass because the Black people thought they were lynching criminals.
Right. A good number of them until Ida B. Wells started shedding light on it.
Right. Nowadays, the same thing is happening, but they don't even have to broadcast these people as criminals. How many people even know what the insurrectionists did inside the Capitol building to the Black police officers they found? You could argue that those were lynchings.
Yeah.
The way they were beating those people, the way there was a report of one man being electrocuted over and over and over and over again until he blacked out with a stun gun, just kept electrocuting them. Mobs of Black, when there's books and information. One of the books PC and I were talking about recently, it's called The Storm Is Here, where there was a reporter that actually went into the State House with the insurrectionists and saw everything that was going on. He wrote a firsthand account of what he saw when he talked about them targeting Black officers and beating them and abusing them. And he also talked about how the white officers were very polite and courteous and in a lot of ways helpful to those people that were in there doing that.
What Kirk Franklin said, it ain't over.
Yeah,
it ain't over.
So it's one of them things where it's like, look, just because it's not on TV and you're not seeing it, that don't mean it's not happening. But pay attention, because the same thing we've always said, they hide the shit in the books. They're still doing that.
They would never get to a point to where they allow us to have any type of control that they don't allow us to have. Don't forget that. They didn't work hard. They don't work hard because we keep talking about, Black people keep talking about how hard white people keep working to suppress this, to suppress that. Well, why the hell you think they're doing that? Why do you think that we keep getting the results we get? Why do you think we keep getting the treatment that we getting from the same group of people? It's not like it's a different group. It's the same damn group of people. Why do you think we keep getting that? Like think about racism like this, and building off what Pat said earlier. Think about if you want to be an individual and you want to attack racism alone, imagine yourself as a lone soldier fighting an army of 100,000. You finna get your ass toe up.
We're gonna tell this story. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Because I got what I'm saying. I know what I'm saying.
Oh, I was gonna say I'll tell this story real quick. It's a story I often use to talk about to get kids to think about the long-term ramifications of their actions when they sit in front of me and they say, well, Mr. Pat, I'm gonna go to war by myself. I don't need nobody. Everybody know that one black person could take out a whole community of white people because we like that. This is literally what these young people say to me. And I tell them the story of the Sweets. The Sweet family was a family in the early 1900s, a black family. The man had risen up from poverty to become a doctor, a physician in the city of Detroit. And he no longer wanted, he felt like, I've achieved this in my life. I want to buy a nice house in a nice community to raise my kids with my family. But he knew that other black people that had went into that community had been run out of there by mobs of white people that didn't want them there. So he said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into that community. I'm going to buy my house, move into that community, and I'm going to have my friends there. And they're going to help me to fend off the mob that I know is going to come. So he had himself in there. There were 11 other black people in that house, including his wife. They were all there, with the exception of his wife. She was there because her husband was there and his daughter. But they were all there to help him defend the early stages of the mob that they knew were coming. The mob came in, throwing rocks and stuff in the house. They all armed themselves. The mob surges into the house. They fire off 20 shots, kill 2 white men. Police officer bust in the house, arrest him and all 11 black people in there with him, put him on trial for murder. He says self-defense. Police officer says there was never any mob. This was just good white people walking through the neighborhood on the evening stroll, and these niggas decided to open fire. They pointed to all of the rocks and stuff in the house. That all came after the shots rang out. So, all this being said, I'm cutting the story short. He eventually gets off. They go to trial. The cop changes the story just enough so that the Justice Department can't hold a case. The dude gets off, but he was held in prison without bond, him and his wife and his daughter. They all caught tuberculosis. His wife and daughter died. He was in debt because of the court case, had to sell the house. He ended up back in abject poverty with a dead wife, a dead daughter. The end of the story, he put a gun to his head and blew his brains out. Understand the system you're working with. Just because you can beat up 5 white people in the moment don't mean that you ain't going to end up in abject poverty somewhere blowing your brains out.
Henceforth, that's why a code of conduct is needed.
Well, see,